Out of Africa, but not out of danger. Video journalist Florian Plaucher is back in Paris after spending 6 days in Sierra Leone, covering the Ebola epidemic. His work brought him in close contact with victims of the disease, putting him at risk of infection. He's still in the 21-day incubation period.
You mustn't panic because that becomes difficult to cope with psychologically. But at the same time, you must be careful. You must listen to your body and also respect the fears of those around you.
Journalist Elise Menon spent a week in Liberia for French television programme Envoi Spécial. While she took her temperature 3 or 4 times a day on her return, her colleagues were relaxed around her.
I
was lucky to be in a newsroom where I wasn't rejected, as has been the case in other newsrooms. That's to say that I was able to go back to work without being blacklisted. People still kiss me on the cheek and continue to work with me.
French radio station RFI has been covering the Ebola epidemic since its outbreak in March. Presenter Claire Hedden travelled to Guinea to host 2 special programmes about the disease. But many of her colleagues, she says, are too scared to go.
What has struck me about this story is that journalists are more afraid of going to report on Ebola than to go on assignment to Central Africa, Mali or Iraq, which are very dangerous places and which seems to me incredibly risky. So I think there's a real fear of this epidemic, which we need to understand. It's seen as the invisible enemy. This virus, it isn't visible.
News channel France 24 places its journalists in quarantine after reporting from an Ebola-affected region. But despite the risks and the costs involved, the channel believes it's important to continue its coverage on the ground.
With Ebola, there are the facts, and the facts are clear despite certain grey areas. And then there is fantasy. It seems to me that there are 2 professions which need to disregard the fantasy. That's first of all the medical profession, and then journalists, who are tasked with transmitting this information, transmitting it in the most factual way possible.
But as governments attempt to cut access to the worst affected countries, there's a growing realisation that the fear of Ebola is spreading faster than the disease itself.